Welcome on a Thursday morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It is the 2023 ACSA Vice President for Legislative Action Candidate Forum. Coming up, we will go through a question and answer session with our two great candidates for VPLA. Plus, we'll give you a chance to ask your questions as this is a live and interactive event. The 2023 ACSA VPLA Candidate Forum starts now. And it is just after 10 o'clock on a Thursday. We welcome you to our 2023 ACSA Vice President for Legislative Action Candidate Forum. Coming up, we will hear from our two great candidates for this VPLA statewide position. We'll ask them questions and give you the opportunity to ask questions as well, as this is a live and interactive event, and we're honored to have you. A little bit about this position. This is a member of our executive board position. It is a 2-year term, and they work collaboratively with ACSA's regional vice presidents for legislative action and our legislative policy committee. And before we bring on our two candidates, let me tell you a little bit about how this forum is going to work and how you can participate. We have these two candidates. We have a series of questions for them. Each candidate will have the opportunity to respond first to two of the questions before we move on to closing comments. They're giving 2 minutes each to provide their responses. And then if any questions are submitted live on our comment section, we will get to those questions after the 4 already designed questions and after mind you, and before our closing statement. So let's go ahead and bring on our two great candidates here for the statewide VPLA position. Gina Potter, Superintendent, San Ysidro Elementary School District, ACSA Region 18, and Dana Carter, Principal in Yucaipa Calamasa Joint Unified School District, ACSA Region 12. Gina and Dana, first, thank you for your commitment to this organization and for being a candidate for this very important position, the Vice President for Legislative Action, which has an incredible impact on everything we do, not just statewide, but also in the state capitol, and for your commitment to being part of our executive board for this 2-year term. Gina, I will have you start with question number 1. Post-pandemic, what do you see are the key legislative issues in service of students, and how do you think ACSA can be involved in supporting and advocating for the students?
Good morning, Naj. Good morning, everyone. It's truly an honor to serve as ACSA's current state VPLA and to run again as for a second term. Last week, our Vice Presidents for Legislative Action team of 19 representatives across the state of California, we launched our 43rd Legislative Action Days event in Sacramento, where we gathered over 250 educational leaders to advocate on behalf of education for 6 million students that we serve. ACSA currently has one of the most prominent and influential voices in the state capitol on behalf of our students and their education. And this was evident in our VPLAs who met last week with almost 100 of the 120 senators and assembly members representing every region in California. Additionally, ACSA's incredible governmental relations team secured keynote speakers such as the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Chair of the Senate Education Committee, representatives from the Assembly, Senate, Education Committees, and even a speaker series from the Governor's Office. And we also recognized the Friends of Education Assemblymember Al Murasucci and the Executive Director of the State Board of Education, Brooks Allen. During our state advocacy event, we focused on 5 key legislative areas. The first was robust and stable school funding, and we asked that we support the governor's proposal to fully fund the LCFF and the statutorily determined COLA of just over 8%. We also asked to preserve the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Block Grant, and we noted that the 2022 Budget Act included $3.5 million in one-time funding for this grant. However, unfortunately, the governor's proposed budget retroactively has a cut of $1.2 billion. So we asked to fully fund it. We asked to secure safe and modern schools and funding for that, to truly address the staffing shortage in education, and to streamline accountability. I think finally, it's so important that we work to build our relationships with our local lawmakers, that we share our individual stories of our schools and our students in hopes that we can truly ensure the strongest educational foundation to provide every student an opportunity to succeed. Those were our 5 key areas, Naj, and I think we really did a phenomenal job last week representing those areas at the state level in the Capitol.
All right. Thank you, Gina. Dana, let me go ahead and repeat the question for you. Post pandemic, what do you see are the key legislative issues in support of students? And how do you think ACSA can be involved in supporting and advocating for the students?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for those of you who are here or watching afterwards. And I appreciate the opportunity because, as the question states, there are many key issues right now that ACSA can assist with post-pandemic. ACSA has been the voice and will continue to be the voice for every student, pre-K through adult in California. And some of those issues at the forefront that I see ACSA really engaging in has to do with mental health issues, not just for our students, but for our staff members and for our administration team, and looking at what supports are in place. Another key area that needs to be looked at is changing how we approach behavior intervention. This has been a huge issue in our area districts, and we're learning, as everyone across the state, is some of the things that we've done in the past are need to be changed, and we're making those changes so that we can support every student. And the other aspect is working very closely with our ledge team, with our legislators whom we've built these relationships, because oftentimes there are many bills that they propose where their intent may be well, but it may include unfunded mandates, or there may be a targeted audience where that bill is really addressing that may be appropriate for the target audience, not necessarily the entire state, but it would favor well with their constituency. So they're proposing it because that's their lens. We need to come in and advocate because we advocate for the entire state. We need to advocate for the large schools like LAUSD, all the way to the small schools, all the way through Northern and Southern California. And that is where I see ACSA really playing a role in advocacy post-pandemic. It's continuing that work, addressing those issues. And some of the examples, our Ledge Policy Committee did an amazing job of reviewing them. There's some of those bills there, like AB 384 was a good example. It talks about school facilities, great intent. It's not that we're opposed to the intent of the bill, but ACSA actually is opposing it because the cost would be too burdensome on our schools. And those are the types of messages that we need to make sure our legislators are hearing and understanding. And that's how we support students across the whole state.
Dana, let me have you respond first to the next question. Let's discuss equity, because the pandemic has created new or exacerbated existing equity issues. What are some ways ACSA can be a leader in confronting some of the equity issues that are at the forefront of California public education?
Equity is a primary, excuse me, a message that ACSA has been behind for several years now. We truly do represent every student pre-K through adult. And part of that equity, and this comes from my personal belief, but it also is our organizational belief. My personal belief is that every person is made in the image of God and has value. We don't all come from the same place. We don't all agree politically. We have some differences, but our goal in ACSA is to honor those differences and to honor everybody, every student, every teacher, every administrator has value, and that value needs to be recognized and not put to the side. We need to make sure that everyone has a voice and that their voice is heard, and then that voice is measured and looked at in the context and through the lens of what is going to benefit students. Ensuring that every voice is heard, but then when we filter through the lens of how does this support our students, in line with our previous question of they're addressing the mental health, addressing the behavioral issues that have seemed to have risen post-COVID, addressing all of the unfunded mandates that we are juggling. It's a large task, and gratefully, I'm prepared to join the GR staff. Our GR staff has done an amazing job of building bridges with our legislators so that they understand the issues that we're dealing with. And in this position, I will continue to work with them and continue to build those bridges so that we can effectively make sure that every student, regardless of your background, regardless of where you come from, that your voice can be heard and that your needs can be met.
Gina, let me go ahead and repeat the question for you. So let's discuss equity, because the pandemic has created new or exacerbated existing equity issues. What are some ways ACSA can be a leader in confronting some of the equity issues that are at the forefront of California public education?
I'll just start by sharing that I echo and share many of the same concerns that Dana just spoke about. The pandemic most definitely exacerbated existing equity issues for our students. Most notably, the student groups that clearly suffered during the pandemic are students receiving special education services, our homeless students, our English language learners, and our students who are impacted by poverty in California. This week, I was privileged to travel to Washington, D.C. for the California School Boards Association and ACSA's co-sponsored federal advocacy trip. And we advocated to address these equity disparities by asking for some primary issues. And I'm going to cover just the 5 top areas that we were advocating for. The first was we asked the federal government to fulfill the special education funding promise, wherein 45 years ago, when Congress passed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, they promised to provide 40% of the average per pupil expenditure to pay for this federal mandate. However, in 2020, 2021, federal funding for California's share of IDEA was only 7.77%, and nationally, IDEA has been funded as low as 12%. So we strongly supported legislation that would provide a pathway to the 40% funding promise for special education. We also advocated to increase mental health prevention and intervention programs. We advocated to continue the universal meal programs, and we supported the president's proposal to expand the community eligibility provision in fiscal year 2024. We asked to maintain and expand broadband access because many of the federal and the state internet and computer access programs for students, they're expiring post-pandemic. So we asked to maintain and continue the Emergency Connectivity Fund and to simplify that E-rate program. And finally, we addressed also at the federal level and at the state level, the educator shortage. We support increasing funding for educator preparation programs and the president's new fiscal year budget. So in short, I think those are the areas, and we have much work in front of us to deal with on behalf of the students we serve.
Let me remind all of our viewers out there, this is the 2023 ACSA Vice President for Legislative Action Candidate Forum. And let me reintroduce you to our 2 candidates, Gina Potter, Superintendent of San Ysidro Elementary School District, that is ACSA Region 18, and Dana Carter, Principal, Yucaipa-Calimesa Joint Unified School District, ACSA Region 12. And just so you know how we are going through this process, each one of our candidates is having the opportunity to respond first to our preset of questions here and give a 2-minute response. We will answer any questions that come in on our chat. So if you are watching and have a question for either of our candidates, go ahead and submit it in our comment section, and then we'll move on to closing statements, 2 minutes long on that as well. Gina, let me ask you first, question number 3. Student and education leader advocacy are incredibly important, and we've seen examples of that time and time again with our advocacy efforts locally and in the state capitol. Let's talk about how we can expand that role and continue to push ACSA as the leader in student and educator advocacy.
Thank you, Naj. Over the last 5 years, ACSA has truly become a leading voice in advocating for students in the Capitol. And I think it's important to recognize the critical advocacy role that ACSA has played and to really shout out the notable achievements that have been made. And some of those notable achievements are advocating last year for the state's largest financial investment in education in over a decade with a double COLA. ACSA's pivotal role during the pandemic in partnering with our governmental leaders and staff to protect education on a weekly basis with the ever-changing safety protocols and regulations that were coming at us, and helping to return educators back to educating and out of those more healthcare oriented mandates of oversight by safeguarding the local control funding formula and really allowing our school districts and our schools to maintain local control of what we think is best to help students be successful and succeed, and also in maintaining the integrity of the LCAP, that local control accountability plan. We advocated strongly as ACSA to protect member pensions from the STRS audits, and I'm so proud of us for boldly and unabashedly advocating for equity for our students and throughout the educational system. I think ACSA's role with the State Board of Education and with the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence is continuing to grow and be influential. And I also think that ACSA's advocacy role and influence is developing at the federal level. And this is an area of focus that I believe will continue to grow for us.
Dana, let me repeat the question for you. Student and education leader advocacy are incredibly important, and we've seen examples of that time and time again with our advocacy efforts locally and statewide in the state capitol. So let's talk about how we can expand that role and continue to push ACSA as the leader in student and educator advocacy.
Thank you, Naj. And as Gina said, ACSA has been very successful. We've had many successes over the last few years, actually over the last 40 years, and we want to, I want to maintain that success, continue that success, and continue the work that has been started. And part of that aspect and part of that question is student and education leader advocacy is a key component. And one of the aspects that I would like to bring into that, or at least maybe enhance a little bit, would be that student portion. Currently, in my role as VPLA, in my experiences as VPLA, both in the region, at the charter, we do a pretty good job of getting our administrators involved. Our GR staff does an amazing job of helping prepare us and give us the information. ACSA staff helps prepare us. Our ledge policy team works together, and all of those pieces are coordinating well, and we want to keep that and maintain that. But the other piece that I would like to kind of add another layer on is that student piece. We are advocating for students, and we do it every day. We do it in our classrooms. We do it when we go to Sacramento. We do it when we meet with legislators. But I've also found that, as everyone who has attended Ledge Day knows, it's our stories that are powerful. And one of the most powerful ways to share a student story is have the students share it themselves. And so one of the things that I would like to put in addition to it is we have our dual meetings. We have our spring meeting, and we have our fall meeting. And the fall meeting that has been established, which has been successful, is doing that locally. And that's an opportunity to have students engage and have their voices be heard so that we can bring greater student voice into it. And the legislators listen differently when a student is in the room and says, "This is how your bill impacted me." Yes, they listen to us as administrators, but having a student in the room, what a difference. And so if we do that at the local piece, it doesn't impact travel and other aspects. It should be a low-cost way, but it's a way of bringing that student voice so that when we meet them in Sacramento, they've already had that student voice experience, and it just reaffirms that we are doing the best we can for students and ensuring that their voice is part of our voice as we work jointly together.
Let's move down to our last question. And Dana, we'll have you start with this last question. 5 years from now, where's our organization? And how do you think your prospective position in state ACSA leadership can move us in that direction?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is we're right here. We're not going anywhere. The organization is well established, and I don't think anybody has thinking that it would. But when you're forward planning, there's always what is our next step, what is our next moving forward piece. But we want to do that with also maintaining and building what we've established that works well. Post COVID, a lot of everyone's world got turned upside down. And part of where we're at now is we're putting it back together. But as we put it back together, we're really evaluating what pieces do we need to keep, what pieces do we need to toss out. So 5 years from now, I think that ACSA will continue and be that advocate for every student, pre-K through adult, because we serve pre-K through adult. We will be having a greater voice in Sacramento because our legislators will not only know that we are here to represent every student, but they will hear our administrator's voice. They will hear our students' voice, and knowing that those voices are that those voices will be able to share what they have done and how we partner make a difference. During our Ledge Day meetings, part of what we discussed was some of the funding aspects, and we've discussed that earlier today. Gina shared what we're trying to protect, and one of our assembly members bluntly told us, sorry, the cuts will be made. But it was through building that relationship with him where at least we've got him to commit to trying to protect education. And this is from an assembly member who hasn't historically been an education friend, but we're meeting with him. He's hearing student voices. We actually have him coming to a graduation ceremony on a campus in our county, reinforcing that he needs to be here, and we will be here for them, and for him, but he also needs to be here for ACSA, and because ACSA is here for every student.
Gina, let me repeat the question for you. 5 years from now, where's our organization? And how do you think your prospective position in state ACSA leadership can move us in that direction?
Dana said it best, ACSA student focused, and we're well established. We are the premier and leading educational leadership association in the entire nation. And I'm so proud of that for us. 5 years from now, ACSA will grow in size and influence statewide and at the national level. And what I think is about to happen is we will go from having 17,000 members in our organization to 20,000 members. As educational leaders, we'll take this opportunity to continue to develop our relationships with new senators and assembly members as they come in and out of the Capitol, and both here in California and in Washington, D.C. I think we'll continue to share our stories about our students and what they're going through and the resources and support that they need to be successful. So that we can truly help all students succeed. We'll help our state leaders provide our students and educational staff members and the families in our communities with the time, the grace, the patience, and the compassion that we truly need to heal from the devastating impacts that the pandemic has had on our families, our households, and in our schools for our students. And finally, we'll continue to boldly advocate for robust and stable school funding to ensure that our students receive the high quality education so that they can achieve their own personal American dreams.
We do have a question from Daryl Camp, and I'll ask it and give you guys a moment both to ponder an answer, and then we'll move over to that. Daryl Camp asks, do you have any ideas on ensuring that diverse voices are present and heard in ACSA's policy committee when considering legislative bills? I'll give you a moment to think about that question. It allows me to remind you that on Tuesday we had our vice president candidate forum for the 2023 election right here on our ACSA YouTube page. You can go back and watch that. That included Daryl Camp, superintendent from San Lorenzo Unified School District, and Julie Vitale from Oceanside Unified School District. So if you have the opportunity to watch that vice president candidate forum, you can do so right here on our ACSA YouTube page. Gina, let me start with you in responding to this question, the one that came in from Daryl Camp. Do you have any ideas on ensuring that diverse voices are present and heard in ACSA's policy committee when considering legislative bills? We'll give you 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, I'll start with a shout out to the chair of the Legislative Policy Committee, Jonathan Brunson. He does a remarkable job leading the LPC committee for ACSA. And then I'll also do a shout out to all of the members of LPC representing ACSA at the state level. So the manner in which the Legislative Policy Committee is established is that there is one representative from every committee and every council in ACSA. And all of those entities come in and into creating the body of the Legislative Policy Committee. So that in and of itself gives diversity in the sense that ACSA's committees and councils are created based on the different segments of education, whether it be special education or the Business Services Council or the Secondary Council and Committee. And so you have this amalgamation of different ideas and voices, the Human Resources Committee, for example. And the Curriculum Committee is there as well. It really giving a different lens, and I think when it looks at, in considering Daryl's question about diversity, ACSA champions issues of diversity and equity. And so knowing that we had about just over 2,500 legislative proposed bills that came in this legislative bill cycle alone, and knowing that this Legislative Policy Committee had to read probably at least 100 of those bills that they narrowed down to through the governmental relations team to identify what are the priority bills that we want to support or not support. I think that's critically important. Where I see the LPC going in the future, along with our VPLA team going in the future, is really looking at, well, what bills do we as ACSA want to sponsor, right? Where we can find an author to those bills, where the focus is narrowed truly down into topics of equity and diversity for the students that we serve. And those bills are critically important to look at which ones are coming to us and how do we truly elevate those bills that provide protection, protective layers for the diverse population of students that we're safeguarding through our schools. Thank you, Daryl, for that question.
Dana, let me repeat the question from Daryl Camp. Do you have any ideas on ensuring that diverse voices are present and heard in ACSA's policy committee when considering legislative bills?
Yes, and again, Daryl, thank you as well for the question. Dr. Potter did share the makeup of the committee, which really, as explained, has some diversity built into it already. But one of the things that I think could be strengthened is that relationship between the Leg Policy Committee member and our Leg Action or our VPLA at the region level. Some regions do it really well, other regions not as well. And that's would be a great venue through engaging regions and working with region VPLAs and Leg Policy Committees. It would create a greater level of communication about what is being covered and what is level of interest. And another piece that I think would be healthy, and it also could expand opportunities for members to engage, is at the region level after the Leg Policy Committee meets. That's your next component, whether it be a Zoom meeting, because with the availability of Zoom, we can pull these meetings off much easier than we could in the past. That's when it's a good opportunity to touch base with your equity rep and bring them into the conversation, because their goal, their sole purpose of working with the region is to make sure that all the voices are heard. And so knowing that our Leg Policy person does have that lens and they want to do this, but there's sometimes, as we all do, we may have blind spots. So bringing that extra person in who really, that's their focus, that's their lens, to kind of review it, just pass through that lens to see, did we miss something, or we're supporting something at the region level, will give our ledge policy and our VPLAs a richer discussion that they can have. And then when the ledge policy committee is discussing these bills, they'll have that lens, that viewpoint, so that we are ensuring that we are including, as I said, pre-K through adult, all our special ed students, all our groups that are often disregarded, whether it's unintentionally or intentionally. And obviously, and I know our vice president candidates talked about this, we really are targeting those voices who are not being heard, to make sure that all students have a voice through our process.
And we are just past the bottom of the hour. We're going to have closing statements in just a moment, but we've just had a question come in from Julie Vitale, superintendent at Oceanside Unified School District, and also one of our candidates for vice president. Again, you can watch that vice presidential candidate forum here on our YouTube page. The question that came in from Julie, what do you think ACSA's role is at the federal level in regards to policy? And Dana, since Gina answered the last question from Daryl first, I'll let you respond first.
Well, I think it's a great question. And in my 20 years of experience in California, California leads the nation. So what we do impacts the federal level, and it is watched closely. So being engaged at the federal level, and ACSA role, like I know Gina just got back from a federal advocacy trip. I have done them in the past with ACSA, and ensuring that California's voice is heard in DC as well as in Sacramento is very important. Often, if you look at the trends, California leads the way. And when we do something and it does it well, it spreads across the nation. And if there's something where we have resistance, other states, when they meet resistance, they look to California and say, how did they overcome that resistance? How did they address it? And ACSA is the key player in education and helping our legislators at the state level and also at the federal level when it comes to that, through expanding that voice. So that is where I see ACSA's key role at the federal and state level.
Gina, let me repeat the question that came in from Julie. What do you think ACSA's role is at the federal level in regard to policy?
I think that it's critically important that ACSA continues to play a prominent role in the federal policy for education. Having just come from Washington, D.C., I can tell you that there were about, over 300 ACSA and CSBA educational leaders that descended upon the Capitol in Washington, D.C. to really make our voices heard with regards to where we're at with federal educational policies that are happening right now as we speak. And it's critically important that we continue to persistently and consistently be a presence in Washington, D.C., because, there are things and proposals that are happening that could have devastating impacts on education in California. I'll give you an example. When we were in D.C. this week, some of the staffers were saying, that they're very worried that the ESSER funds, the funds that we were given to keep our doors open and to sustain education and recover from the devastating impacts of the pandemic are about to be swept if they're not unspent. Well, that's a proposal that's sitting on the floor right now, and it's ACSA. We have this opportunity with ACSA to quash that proposed bill because that's not good for our students. And we need to be able to have those funds to continue doing this incredibly pivotal and critical work on behalf of the children, because they're all trying to recover from the learning that happened, from their safety, from their social emotional needs. And taking care of the whole child is our most important job right now. and not just taking care of part of the child. And so making sure that the federal government continues to support us at this juncture is incredibly important, because they're the ones that are helping us with universal meals. They're the ones that are helping us with universal access to broadband and internet and technology. And they also are the ones that we are relying on to support our children with special needs. So for us to just continue that presence and to truly remain persistent and consistent in our messaging and communication with them, and in our relationships with them, is also very, very important.
I have one final question that's coming from Daryl Camp, and I will read it to you. Our staff behind the scenes will go ahead and put this up on the board, and I'll give you a moment to think through your answers. So Daryl asks, what are your thoughts on the elimination of K-12 suspension? How will you lead on this issue as the Vice President of Legislative Action? Because ACSA members have varying views. I'll give you just a moment to think through that question from Daryl before we move over to closing comments. Let me just go ahead and reintroduce you. Our two great Vice Presidents for Legislative Action candidates for 2023. Gina Potter is the Superintendent of San Ysidro Elementary School District, that is ACSA Region 18. Dana Carter is Principal in the Yucaipa-Calamasa Joint Unified School District, that is ACSA Region 12. Gina, I'll have you respond first to Daryl's question. I'll repeat it once again. What are your thoughts on the elimination of K-12 suspension? How will you lead on this issue as the Vice President of Legislative Action? ACSA members have varying views. Gina, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Naj. And Daryl, thank you for your question. The concept of suspension in general has had significant research, particularly in the last few years. And really that research is showing the detrimental effects that suspension can have on our students, and predominantly have on our students of color, and our students who are living in vulnerable situations. And so there's been a notable shift, particularly in the state of California, to move towards restorative practices and positive behavior support systems and multi-tiered systems of support, in order to reframe the lens of how we address student behaviors in our schools. And so I would say that, really looking at the heart of what's causing the suspension in the child is extremely important. And it may be that that child came from an incident that happened in their home, where a parent may have been removed the night before, and the child may have been up all night long with no food, coming to school, having endured this traumatic incident, and their behavior may have really come to fruition in the classroom, causing the child to be now eligible for suspension. And my question to us as adult educators, and as the people taking care of our children, how should we address that child? Are we getting at the root cause of what that child needs to be successful? So when it comes to suspensions, if there are policies and changes to be made, I am a proponent and a strong proponent of restorative practices and positive behavior support systems and restorative circles. I believe in giving children second chances. I believe that we all need second chances in life, because we're human. And as a human, we make mistakes. And helping our children recover and learn from their mistakes is critically important.
Dana, your response.
Yes, and I believe it's SB 274 from Skinner that Daryl's question is specific to, which has some nuances, because in elementary, the K is already gone. So it's really focusing on those secondary pieces. And I was fortunate to be part of that robust discussion with Ledge Policy. And as Dr. Potter said, I am very much in support of restorative practices, looking at putting in MTSS or positive behavior supports. I do think we have better alternatives than suspension for this. But at this time, and this is really the question, it's not an issue of is this a good bill or a bad bill? I think most of us would agree this is a good bill in a direction we want to go. The greater issue is of timing, because yes, we are here to support the students, and that is our first priority. We all know that, and that's what I love about ACSA. It is a student-first organization, but we are also here to support our systems and our administrators. And right now, statewide, not all of our administrators have the systems in place. Some of the LEAs need some layers or more support so that they can address these behaviors where students, excuse me, where students are getting the K violation appropriately in different ways. So I would not oppose necessarily against the bill and for it, but it's the timing of the bill and ensuring that we have that our leadership knows this is coming. Give us time to make sure that that supports are in place, and how do we address this? And it can be done. It just needs, I think, to be phased in would be the way to look at it.
And we are 19 minutes in front of 11 o'clock. So let's go ahead and move on to our closing statements today. Each of our candidates for Vice President for Legislative Action have 2 minutes to respond with their closing statements. Gina, we'll have you go first.
Thank you, Naj. You know, it's just been an absolute privilege and honor to serve in education for over 30 years as a superintendent, as a deputy superintendent, a chief business official, principal, a teacher, and a classified academic mentor. And I would say that I've proudly dedicated my entire life to serving children. As the third generation of educators in my family, where my grandfather was a teacher, my father was a teacher and a principal, my mother was a teacher, I can soundly say that my family's committed to education. And we know that it is the very gift that we can give to our children so they can overcome barriers and truly live both a happy and successful life. I've proudly also served as an ACSA member for over 20 years, and my father's been an ACSA member for now 42 years. And I'm deeply committed, as is Dana, I know, to ensuring that ACSA continues to be the driving force of education in California. So I would just end by saying thank you. Thank you for considering me for a second term as ACSA State Vice President for Legislative Action, and I promise to continue to lift up ACSA and to ensure that our voices are heard on behalf of the students that we serve. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gina, for that. Dana, your closing statements. Did we lose Dana's audio? Apparently, we've lost Dana's audio. There we go. We got it back.
Apologize. It's the Zoom etiquette error of not clicking unmute.
That's right.
So, Dr. Potter, thank you for your service over the last 2 years. I've had the privilege of being a VPLA under you, and that's part of the reason why I've decided to take this step and move up, because I want to lead and give back in the ways you have. I've been a member of ACSA since becoming an administrator. It's been over 17 years now. I've lost track, to be honest. I've got 20 plus years in education. I've taught at the elementary level and the high school levels. Administratively, I've served pre-K children, middle school children, elementary children, high school children, and I'm now serving adults. So I've had the privilege of working the full breadth of our K-12 system to better understand different nuances and aspects at those levels, which I think helps give me a lens when I hear from the field, but some of the things you're dealing with, I can actually share with you, I've been there, and I may not have experienced everything, but I have experienced some of those aspects through my service and through my time with ACSA and through my different administrative positions that I've held. The other aspect as we wrap up is ACSA is and will continue to be on the forefront of putting students first. It's what we do every day, and it's what, if you elect me as your VPLA, I will continue to do. And thank you for considering me for this position as we serve ACSA each day, and as we engage our regions and we expand ACSA's influence not just in Sacramento, but in your city and in your town and in your school district, because we are serving your students, and your goal is to help your students be better every day.
Let me go ahead and thank our two candidates for our statewide 2023 ACSA Vice President for Legislative Action race. Gina Potter, Superintendent of San Ysidro Elementary School District, ACSA Region 18. Dana Carter, Principal, Yucaipa Calamasa Joint Unified School District, ACSA Region 12. Gina and Dana, it has been great to have you. An honor to have you here on this candidate forum. Again, thank you so much for your commitment to ACSA, and more importantly, your commitment to our students here in California. We wish both of you good luck.
Thank you, and thank you to those who attended and are watching.
And folks,
Thank you so much.
Folks, if you joined us mid-candidate forum, this is on ACSA YouTube, of course. You'll be able to see a recording of this candidate forum right here on our ACSA YouTube page, as well as the candidate forum that we had Tuesday for the vice president candidates. Both of these races will be decided in May at our 2023 ACSA Leadership Assembly that is happening in Sacramento. So we hope you've enjoyed our candidate forum. Don't forget the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, live and interactive Wednesdays, 1 p.m. here on ACSA YouTube, as well as ACSA Facebook. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.